Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who are not present in the courtroom today, I want to take a minute to summarize the nature of the proceedings at our status conference on People versus Christopher Watts this afternoon. Mr. Watts entered a plea of guilty to all 9 counts in the original complaint and information. Those counts include murder in the first degree after deliberation as to Shanann Watts, murder in the first degree as to Bella Watts, murder in the first degree as to Celeste Watts, unlawful termination of a pregnancy as it relates to Nico Watts, and 3 counts of unlawful tampering with a deceased human body. There was a sentencing agreement that calls for the defendant to be sentenced to the Department of Corrections for the remainder of his natural life as to counts 1, 2, and 3. All of those sentences will run consecutively to one another. There's also an agreement that whatever sentence the court imposes as to count 6 will also run consecutively to counts 1 through 3. The remainder of the sentencing will be left to the discretion of the court. That sentencing will occur November 19th at 10 o'clock in the morning. The final piece of the sentencing agreement calls for the district attorney's office, myself, to agree that as a result of his plea of guilty, that he will not face the death penalty. I know that there are going to be a lot of questions about that, so let me address that right up front. Present here in the room with us today is Frank Rouke, Sandra Rouke, and Frank Rouke Jr., Shanann's brother, mom and dad. Mr. Wren and I flew out to North Carolina about 3 weeks ago and spent quite a bit of time with the Rouke family talking about the state of the death penalty in Colorado, the realities of the death penalty. We explained to them the extraordinary delays that currently exist in the state of Colorado as the result of, in part, the actions of our current governor. We discussed the fact that an individual by the name of Nathan Dunlap was convicted and sentenced to death in 1996 and is still alive today. We discussed all of the possible consequences, delays, penalties, timeframes, and I hope I'm saying this accurately. I know they'll correct me if I am wrong, but they were very strongly in favor of a resolution in this case short of the death penalty. That, to me, was the most important consideration in deciding how to proceed with this case. However, as they know, after we had those meetings at their home in North Carolina, I came back and had meetings with all of the law enforcement partners you see standing up here today, with the supervisors in my office, in consultation with other district attorneys around the state, and to a person, the advice and suggestions that I was given was, you do what the victim's family wants you to do in this case. I don't know how I could have sat in Sandy's kitchen and asked her to commit the next 25 years of her life to the criminal justice system without any assurances that that sentence, if ever imposed, or excuse me, if ever obtained, would ever actually be imposed. I want to take an opportunity to thank the law enforcement partners who are standing up here and those who are not up here. This investigation, this prosecution, was exactly what local, state, and federal cooperation should look like. The Frederick Police Department, the Greeley Police Department, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, all worked in conjunction, with one another to present to our office a case that could give this resolution and hopefully this closure to Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico's family. Understand that this is not over. As I said, we have a sentencing hearing in a couple of weeks. I'm going to give Director John Camper from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation an opportunity to say a few words here in a couple of minutes. But understand that at this point, I still can't answer questions about the facts surrounding the investigation because at least at this point, the judge has not formally accepted those guilty pleas and imposed sentence. After that sentencing hearing, we will have an opportunity to answer the questions that I know many in the media, many in the public have had from the day this investigation started. But before we answer any questions, I want to invite up Director John Camper.
Thanks, Mr. Rouke. I think it goes without saying when something so horrible happens, it's really not possible to be particularly celebratory. But that said, I think all of us are gratified at the outcome here, primarily for Shanann's family, but also the many investigators and other professionals, as Mr. Rouke said, some who are represented here and many who are not, who have devoted so much time, energy, and frankly emotion into this tragic case. Really all everyone wanted throughout was justice for Shanann and Bella and Celeste, and we're certainly pleased that this seems to be the outcome. So on behalf of the CBI and I think the other organizations and many who were involved in this, our deepest condolences to the Roukes and their family and friends. Thank you.
I'll be happy to answer questions, but I will be the first to tell you that I truly appreciate the Roukes being present, not only in the state of Colorado, but in this room. I can tell you on behalf of them, they are not prepared, nor do they want to answer questions at this point, and I hope you all will respect that. I will try to answer questions as best I can on their behalf, at least today. So what questions can I answer for you all?
Could the death penalty ever be imposed in the state of Colorado?
I don't know. We have a governor in office right now who, understandably, we have an election going on today. He is term limited. We have a governor who has refused to make a decision as it relates to Nathan Dunlap. I explained that to the Rouke family, and obviously that gives them some pause when I'm asking them to endure a 4 or 5 year delay prior to a trial, and many more years after that of appeals and post-conviction hearings before that sentence could ever possibly be imposed. So when the question was asked of me by their family, what is the realistic outcome of this particular case as it relates to the death penalty, the best I could tell them is I don't know.
You said that they requested that you not seek the death penalty. How did that affect your process?
I went through the same process I would have had their answer been different. I had in my mind from the day this occurred, the steps in the process that I felt like were due diligence in order to come to this decision. I don't think any elected district attorney ever wants to have to make a decision about whether or not to seek the death penalty as it relates to an individual. But when I have a family who has been so incredibly supportive and so incredibly firm in their belief that the death penalty not be sought, I don't know how I would have said to them, I'm going to do it anyway.
How early into the process was that decision made?
The decision was made about 4 days ago.
How was the family how did the family react when you told them about this decision?
I think there were a lot of emotions that went through their mind, and again, they're going to throw something at me if I say something inappropriate. I think that there was a combination of relief, extraordinary sadness that we ever had to have that conversation in the first place. And I can only say that I hope there is a sense of closure. I know that that will never be fully realized because obviously the tragedy that sits before us today is the loss of 4 beautiful lives. And no matter what happens today, no matter what happens at a sentencing hearing down the road, we can't get them back. Sandy said it very, very poignantly to me. She said, he made the choice to take those lives. I do not want to be in a position of making the choice to take his. And so that's about as firmly as she could have said it to me, and that was very compelling to all of us as we were talking about how to proceed on this case.
Chris Watts first said Shanann actually killed the 2 little girls. What was his story when he changed his mind? And were they killed before Shanann got home?
Carol, I don't know the answer to that question. We talked a lot about whether we would require him to come forward and give us what we believe to be a complete, accurate, and truthful statement. I think all of those who were involved never truly believed that he would give us an accurate statement. What I can tell you most affirmatively today by what happened in the courtroom is the spotlight that he tried to shine on Shanann falsely, incorrectly, and frankly a flat-out lie has been corrected. The spotlight shines directly where it belongs, on him.
What's the status of the autopsy?
Those are still sealed at this point. I need to have a conversation with the coroner's office, with Shanann's family, and the county attorney representing the coroner's office about at what point in time those will become a public record. We are not assuming that the sentencing hearing goes the way we believe that it will and goes forward. We will not be asking those be kept sealed any longer after the sentencing hearing.
When did discussions with the defense begin about the plea deal?
Several weeks ago. I can't tell you the exact date, but it's been several weeks in the making. We had very preliminary discussions prior to visiting the Roukes in North Carolina.
Was it just a matter of the death penalty to get a guilty plea?
You'd have to ask them. All I can tell you is the discussions that we had with them And frankly, the discussions that Mr. Wren and I had with the Rouke family made it very clear that there was going to be no further concession. I didn't feel like this was a case where it was appropriate to agree to dismiss some counts in exchange for a plea of guilty to others, because we charged him with what we truly believed he had done at the time we filed that complaint. And I was not willing to entertain any further concessions above and beyond removing the death penalty from consideration.
During your investigation, did you ever get a motive from Chris Watts?
Ask me again in 2.5 weeks, or the day after the day of sentencing. I'll be happy to answer that question. At this point, that's getting a little bit too far into the investigation, at least as we sit right now. We believe that we have a partial motive. I'm not sure if it's the entirety of the motive, but I'll be happy to comment on that following the sentencing hearing.
Will Christopher Watts be solitary confinement?
You know, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Whether or not he's in solitary confinement where he serves his time, whether it be in what DOC facility in the state of Colorado, or if he's one who's transferred to another state, is left to the discretion of the executive director of the Department of Corrections. I don't
The
know.
plea agreement also required those consecutive
Yes.
sentences. Can you talk about the importance of that?
Sure.
To yourself, to law enforcement, and to the prisoners?
Absolutely. I think that the plea of guilty to each of those counts, naming those individual victims, Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico, was an important consideration, but also he deserves a life sentence for each and every act on top of one another. In practicality, it doesn't make a difference in terms of how long he's ultimately going to serve. But what he needs to understand is he will be serving 3 consecutive life sentences plus a sentence for Nico Watts because of the acts that he committed against all 4 of them. It was important that each of those beautiful human beings be reflected in the ultimate sentence that will be imposed.
Does he remain in solitary confinement in the jail?
I don't know what the status of him being held in the jail is. I would expect, I'm speculating or surmising that that's probably something the sheriff would look into or will do pending sentencing, but I don't know where he sits today.
What was the security importance of the garment that he was brought in there?
I don't know. I presume that it was for his own protection. From whom, I don't know. I think that that's a standard safety measure that the sheriff will take in very high-profile cases. I appreciate the sheriff's diligence in protecting him as well as everybody else who's in the courtroom.
Have you ever had a case like this resolved so soon into the investigation?
No.
Have you ever
Total.
had a case like this?
No.
Is that due to the overwhelming amount of evidence in some ways that you think that you had in this case?
I don't know the reason why they approached us initially. I don't know what their thought process was in terms of making this offer to us that was at least compelling enough that we wanted to get on a plane and fly out and see the Rouke family in person. This was not a conversation we were going to have over the telephone or over Skype. But what caused them to come to us in the first place, I don't know. I don't know what it was that pushed them over the tipping point, so to speak.
Did they come with a plea agreement that was similar to what was talked about today?
Initially, no.
Okay.
Recently, yes.
Okay.
As of a couple of days ago, yes.
2 separate
Yes.
offers?
Yes.
Okay.
How does this make you feel?
Sick, saddened. As Director Camper said, no one wins today. I never wanted to have to stand up and have a press conference like this. I'm saddened that I had to meet the Rouke family under these circumstances. It's been a pleasure working with them, in meeting them and knowing them. But as the director said, there is no cause for celebration today.
Will the Rouseks be making victim impact statements at sentencing?
I believe so. That's a conversation that we started when they flew in yesterday, and I'm going to give them some time to thoughtfully decide how they want to proceed at sentencing. So if they don't, Mr. Roach, Mr. Wren, and I will be happy to speak on their behalf. Any other questions?
Sentencing investigation, this is going to be a pro forma sentencing for large part, so why conduct that?
Oftentimes, even in Class 1 felonies, we ask that the probation department complete a pre-sentencing investigation report, as Mr. Wren said, because the Department of Corrections actually benefits from that information. It helps them in classifying offenders more quickly when they reach the regional diagnostic center. I understand the judge's desire to have a sentencing hearing done sooner rather than later, but we were endeavoring to try to do both in order to assist DOC with the classification determination they would have to make. Okay? Thank you very much, everyone.